So Emma, could you tell me a little bit about your brother John and what happened the day he died?
Yeah, well, it was on the 15th of October 2008. John was in a tie in County Kildare, and he was down there. He was collecting his welfare check, so he went down there and picked up his money. So he's waiting on the bus. So in the meantime, he bought himself a pair of runners, and so he was waiting on the bus to come back to Dublin because he was working with his brother-in-law Declan the next day. So he actually missed his bus. We have footage of that. He missed his bus by seconds, so that's how he got the train. He ended up getting the train up to Dublin City from a tie. So he gets to Dublin, and for whatever reasons, he ends up down in Dublin Docklands, and that's where he's heard screaming and shouting for help when he dies in Dublin Docklands that night. So when we got the call on the the guards actually came down to my mother's home Thursday afternoon to tell us that John had passed away in Dublin Docklands. My mother was like, what happened? And they said, well, there was one phone call on the night of screaming and shouting at the Docklands, and we went there. They threw him a rope and he couldn't catch it, so he went under. So things continued on, and his body wasn't released until a week later. They advised us not to view John, to identify him. And they said they'd do it through records, and they would take pictures of his tattoos, and he had a birthmark as well, so we could obviously say that was him. But we never got any of those pictures, and we don't know whether they got the dental records. So really, when you think about it, we were burying someone without a formal identification. So anyway, in the funeral home on the Wednesday before John was buried, my mum insisted that she have a look at her son, to say goodbye. And that's when she seen all the bruising to his face, all the way down his left side of his face. His head was swollen, he'd scrapes all in his hands and knuckles were all marked, blood in his ears. And that's, my mother told us that afterwards, and we were like, what? So nothing added up. Here's this 24-year-old young healthy guy. He had everything to live for. He was going to Australia, and he's ending up in a canal, and we've no explanation as to why. We were never told anything. It was like, John's dead, that's the end of it, you'll have to wait for the inquest. And then every time we rang the guards, saying, well, what about his clothes? Did you get CC footage? Who was he with on the night? Well, like what's going on here, Oh, no, there's nothing suspicious, all this. We were being fobbed off. So after John was buried, so we started looking for his clothes, because we were never given his clothes back. And there was a lot of running around and ringing around. Nobody seemed to know what happened to his clothes. And then finally, one of the guys that works in the coroner's office said that his clothes were badly destroyed with blood and bodily fluids. So, they were covered in blood and bodily fluids, so they had to be destroyed. We didn't get to see his clothes, so that would scream something happened. Why is his clothes covered in blood? And then he's marked all over his face. We were told there was no marks. They're advising for a closed coffin. It just screamed something happened. And we were like, okay, his clothes have been destroyed, right? Okay, so where's his belongings? Where's his phone? Where's his money? Where's his new runners he bought that day? Where's his bracelet? They couldn't answer us. They didn't know. So you have this young guy who's dead. All his belongings are gone. His clothes are destroyed in blood, and he's dead. Something happened here. So we've done our own investigation, and to be honest, it looks like John was beaten up, robbed, and whatever happened, he ended up in that canal, and that's where he died. So the response on the night, we were told there was only one phone call, and that the guards turned up and they threw him a rope and he couldn't catch it, so he went under. So after all this had gone on, we started investigating ourselves, because we were being ignored. So we went, myself and my sisters went around the apartments because John died opposite a block of apartments. And it's a very different picture that the guards portrayed to us, because when we started talking to these residents, they were traumatised by the whole situation of what happened on the night. There was people out on their balconies screaming over because they heard John, and there's a big distance to where John died. John actually woke people up. They were like, it's double glazed windows and there's a good distance, so he was screaming loudly and for so long for help. So some of the residents, like there was 3 girls in particular, they were traumatised when they answered the phone to us and they brought us up to the apartment, and they were saying, oh, we rang twice. There was so many residents that rang in that night, but yeah, we were told there was only one phone call. The whole night was chaos, absolutely chaos. Different story, so...
Can you just tell me a little bit about the Gardaí on the night and what they did on the night and the time it took for them to respond to the calls?
Right, well, we were told that the first call came in at 12:28 for saying that someone was shouting and screaming at Dublin Docklands. And we were told that 2 Gardaí arrived at 12:42, had a look around the area and went off because they didn't see or hear anything. And then they got radioed again to come back to the area because there was more calls coming in. So by the time they actually got back, see, they turned up to the wrong side as well. When it's Pacific, these residents know where they live, so they know the area and how to get to it. So they were very specific about where you go and how to get there. They turned up on the wrong side anyway. So by the time they got around to the other side, it was 12:57, and they say they seen John in the water, and that's when they rang for fire services. And so fire services turned up just as John went under, and they couldn't find him. So I don't understand that, but anyway, the 5 of them stood there and watched him die. But yeah, fire services are right behind them. They get into the water and they can't find him. So, yeah.
And can you then just tell me a little bit about the lack of investigation following his death and the inquest?
Yeah, well, we were ringing the police all the time saying, have you done this, have you done that? We were giving them stuff because at the time then we came across Billy Flynn. He's a private investigator. He's the one that actually uncovered the corruption up in Donegal with the McBurty family. So he came on board and he was helping us. So anytime we got any information, we were passing it on to the guards, but nothing was being done about it. We were ringing up every week saying, "Did you look into this?" And we were constantly being fobbed off. We were just an irritation. Don't be ringing us. So we were just doing everything, passing on the information, hoping that they would do something about it. But anyway, we had our inquest, and obviously they couldn't. They tried to portray that John had committed suicide. So let me go back to the night. All these residents that heard John crying for help, and they were ringing 999 and all that. When the guards came around to interview these residents, the girl, obviously, a lot of them were distressed over what happened because someone lost their life. So some of them were saying, what happened, like? And the guards said, it was suicide, Some people just don't want help. And that wasn't just to one resident, it was to a few. And not only that, like when John was taken out of the water the next day, a doctor has to come along and pronounce him dead. So this doctor turns up on the scene and has a 2-minute conversation with a sergeant, and then pronounces John dead by impression as suicidal death. So they tried to portray that John killed himself when there was no way in hell he killed himself. So the inquest ended up as it came out as misadventure.
Can I just ask you where you're at now? Because obviously there was an inquest where the verdict was death by misadventure, but obviously you're saying that you don't believe that is the truth, and also you have issues with the guards and how this was handled, and at the very least it's incompetence by the guards, both on the night but also subsequently. So can you just tell me a little bit about where you're at now in trying to get justice for John?
Yeah, well, we've been campaigning all this time now. And then in 2014, the Minister for Justice, Francis Fitzgerald, had decided to set up the independent review mechanism on foot of the Gardaí report because of all the complaints. There was a lot, 320 cases. And, so I was contacted because I was living in Australia at the time, so I didn't know what was going on. So another person that I know, her sister's murdered, and she told me about it, and she was like, come on, get your case in. I was like, all right, Grant. So I wrote to the Minister for Justice, and what I did was I actually done a 2-page document, and I outlined only a small amount of our complaint, a small amount, but it was major points in the case. So it wasn't the whole lot. I just sent that off on the assumption that we would be contacted, interviewed, asked for more information. None of that. No, none of that. So we kept emailing, this is 2014, and we kept just getting acknowledgements. And then 2015, the guards came to my mother's to tell her that there was 2 anonymous letters sent to Garda station, and they actually named 2 people who were to be meeting with John on the night, and that could have information as to his death. So these letters were posted into Tallaght station in 2014, but we were only told about it in 2015. So I was like, okay, can we have a copy of those letters? No. We were denied a copy of these letters. My sister Amanda was home at the time. She's living in Australia as well. So she went in and had a meeting, and she asked to see the letters. And they sat there with the letters and actually read them out to her. They wouldn't let her see them, take a picture, or even take a copy of the letters. So that was fine. So we wrote to the Minister for Justice again, telling her about this new information. If this is vital information, it's not 1 letter, it's 2. Somebody has sat down and wrote 2 letters saying the same information. So they obviously seen nothing was going on, so they thought they'd write another letter. So anyway, I emailed the minister and got nothing back. I emailed her again saying, I've emailed you previously on this date. This is vital information. This needs to be added to the panel review. This is more information. And acknowledgements, that's all I got. So we've been, again, ignored. This information hasn't been added, nothing. We've just been dismissed and ignored again. So in December 2015, we did finally receive a response from the Minister's office, and it was to say that we'll be having an inquiry under Section 42 of the Garda Síochána Act, which will be investigating the circumstances surrounding John's death. So we were like, okay, 2015, roll on 2016, the same letter, she was speaking with the Attorney General about terms of reference on this inquiry. So that's, I'm home now, so I've been engaging with legal team, and like this inquiry, they haven't got the full story. They don't have all of my complaint. They don't have the full details. So, and they're not engaging with us on an inquiry about us. So how can you go ahead with an inquiry that's all one-sided and secret? How's that transparent? It's not. And she's actually in breach of Article 2, and that's so. Article 2 is it enshrines the right to life, but not only the right to life, but to an effective investigation into the taking of a life. So therefore the investigation must be independent, effective and expeditious, all of which it's not happening. So basically they're in breach of Article 2 of the European Commission's human rights, you know, so I honestly don't know where they're going with this. You know, there's nothing transparent, it's not independent. They won't even engage with my family. So how are we gonna have justice? How are we gonna have a proper inquiry when they don't have all the complaints and the full facts? You know?
Yeah. Thank you very much for speaking to me today, Emma. It's been very interesting to hear your story. Do you have anything else you'd like to add at the moment, or?
Well, yes. We won't stop. We will not stop until we get justice. You know, the whole way we've been treated, not only that, the whole procedures, everything on Garda Síochána seriously needs to be looked at and addressed, because this is just not acceptable. It's not good enough. It's not fit for purpose. None of it is. And it looks like the whole system is not fit for purpose. So, you know, we won't stop.
Thank you so much, Emma, for speaking to me.